Welcome back and thanks for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, the ANC will remain in the opposition benches in the city of Tshwane after the DA's Randall Williams retained his position as executive mayor. Williams was elected unopposed as the ANC did not submit any candidate for the mayoral position. Now, this loss follows a similar fate suffered by the ANC in two of the other Gauteng-based metros, namely the City of Johannesburg as well as Ekurhuleni. Now, the metros were handed to the DA by political parties who collectively voted for the party without a formal agreement or any terms on the table. Now, assistant editor of News 24 and author of the book, The Stellenbosch Mafia, Pieter du Toit, joins us now virtually. Pieter, good to see you again. Thanks for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning, Leanne. Good being with you.
So it's been exciting ever since the November 1st polls. We knew we were going to be in for quite turbulent times, looking at the margins of success, of winning and losing. But what have you made of the council compositions overall to date?
Sakina, first, I have to say, and we have to admit to each other, we're in uncharted territory. This is probably the biggest realignment of South African politics since 1994. The simple reason for that is that the ANC have now lost power in the biggest metro municipalities in the country, which includes Cape Town, of course, Johannesburg and Tshwane, also Ekurhuleni, and today it's on the verge of losing eThekwini, which has for many years literally been a stronghold for the African National Congress. So this election really was a watershed. I think in the media we bandy about the term a watershed election or a turning point, or the political tectonic plates are shifting. But this really has been one of those elections. We literally see the environment, the political environment changing daily. And if you look, you're referring to the composition of some of these councils. Of course, the ANC are the minority parties in these councils, now part of a minority. We're going to have minority governments in Johannesburg and certainly Ekurhuleni in Gauteng. And what that means is that you're going to the party that has the mayoralty, in this case the DA, will be at the head of a minority government. So they will not be able to pass budgets as they want to. They will not be able to do what they want, even though we've heard some pretty inspiring words from the new mayors of Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. They will be dependent on the support of smaller parties. They'll be dependent on the support of the EFF. So those coalitions or informal working arrangements, Sakina, will be very brittle. However, in Tshwane, it is going to be different. There will be a formal coalition. There will be a majority government with a DA mayor. But the difference between Tshwane and the difference between Tshwane and the other two metros in Gauteng is that you're going to have a majority government in Tshwane. You're going to have a majority coalition, and they will be able to govern unencumbered for the next 5 years, which makes Tshwane, I would argue, the metro municipality in Gauteng to keep your eye on over the next 5 years.
Now, you say brittle. I think precarious, perhaps another good word to describe what is playing out, especially where you have minority councils here. And Action SA leader Herman Mashaba, he said that the EFF and Action SA actually realized that the DA wanted to hand over municipalities to the ANC, and they blocked this move because the two parties, Action SA and the EFF, gave their votes to the DA without any formal agreement, as you mentioned, or any terms on the table. So let's look at how this is possibly going to play out. Because as you say, Tshwane, different story, but if you look at the City of Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, it becomes quite interesting there. Just in terms of service delivery, which was, of course, one of the big issues going into the elections, and people basically crying about the lack thereof. How is this going to affect how services may be delivered, how budgets are passed, etc., in these councils?
Sakina, it's going to be so important that the leaders of these parties put aside their personality issues, their personality differences, because it's clear that is playing a role. It's clear that someone like Herman Mashaba, who is the leader of Action SA, presses the wrong buttons inside of the DA. We can clearly see, if you just on a cursory level follow social media, Herman Mashaba and Helen Zille, the DA's federal chairperson, are at each other's throats all the time. And now Herman Mashaba last night said that if the DA want to negotiate further with Action SA, they can only do so if Julius Malema's EFF is in the room. Now, taking hardline positions during these negotiations, taking hardline positions when you want to establish a working relationship with a party other than your own, and a party that you're going to be dependent on when you want to ensure service delivery is going to be vital. And at the end of the day, if these leaders cannot put aside their petty personality differences, if they cannot find each other, if they are unable to reach consensus, if they're unable to give up some of their demands in favor of another party's, then it will be service delivery that will be suffering, Sakina. Then it will be the man on the street, people at grassroots level who are already struggling with intermittent electricity supply in Johannesburg. Last week we saw many suburbs without water for a good couple of days. We know in cities like Mangaung and Bloemfontein, many of these services have pretty much ground to a halt. We know that service delivery is a problem in Ekurhuleni. We know there have been major issues with billing in Tshwane. So these are all issues that affect you and I as citizens of these cities. So it's going to be very difficult to pass budgets if these parties cannot agree with each other on basic terms of engagement. If they cannot agree with each other on the basic principles of what they want to achieve over the next 5 years. That's why Tshwane is going to be such an exceptionally important test tube project for the smaller opposition parties, because they're busy entering into a formal coalition agreement, which means they will all be bound to a set of principles. So that will be a majority government, and they'll be able to pass budgets at 50% plus one, as you would normally do. In Johannesburg, that's going to be much more difficult. And you use the word precarious, and that's exactly what citizens will experience over the last 5 years: precarious service delivery, because you're going to have a minority government where the DA will have the mayoralty, but they're going to be dependent on Action SA and the EFF for passing budgets, for changing policy, for effecting new creative ways of ensuring service delivery. And the EFF and Action SA will both level their demands at the DA. They will both want their pound of flesh. If they don't get it, the DA's mayor and the executive committee will be prevented, for example, for passing budgets. So it's going to be very difficult, and politicians are going to have to show a level of maturity which I don't think we've seen, Sakina. So the voters need to keep them accountable. And I think that's why this election was so important. 2024, the general election, parties will be called out if they do not deliver in this election cycle.
And that's going to be equally interesting. But just on a point you touched on earlier, Action SA's Herman Mashaba, he's already said that the DA should realize that their vote is not a gift. And as you said, yesterday, Mashaba was still expecting a call from the DA to negotiate. What would be wise for the DA to do in handling this situation for successful, effective councils in these minority municipalities? Because you saw earlier in the week, or if it was last week, where the smaller parties actually wrote a letter to the DA when John Steenhuisen went on to do that media briefing, and they felt slighted by that. So how should the DA actually approach this?
The DA, I think, in a difficult spot. They've now been thrust into the mayoralty of, let's take Johannesburg as the case study. They've now been thrust into the mayoralty of Johannesburg. They will be the face of this municipality because the mayor will be from the DA. That will be the face of service delivery. It will be the face of the City of Johannesburg. It will be the face of any successes that the City of Johannesburg achieves over the next 5 years. But it will also be the face of the failures that will inevitably come. So it is a case of the EFF and Action SA pretty much holding a gun to the DA's head, saying, look, you will be the mayor because we've now put you into that position because we all voted for you. But if you don't do what we say, then we might very well bring down your government. We might prevent budgets from being passed. We might prevent new development programs from being implemented. So it's going to be very difficult for the DA, the EFF, and Action SA to navigate this space, because the DA are on record saying that they do not want to work with the EFF. They are on the opposite scales of the ideological spectrum. You know, they simply do not agree on anything. And they are two very different parties. The one is a social democratic liberal party. The other one is an African nationalist party, socialist party. So they are totally different. Then you've got the Action SA in the middle, which is led by someone that has come from the DA, but who has really broken with the party to such an extent that it's moving closer to the EFF. So the DA is in a difficult position because the failures of the City of Johannesburg will be for its account. So you're asking what they should do. Look, all these parties are negotiating with each other on the basis of their principles, their set of principles, but everyone's going to have to give up something. If the DA, who have now been thrust into the mayoralty and have accepted the mayoralty, wants this to succeed, they're going to have to find a way of working with Mashaba. They're going to have to find a way of working with the EFF. The concerns the previous round when Mashaba was mayor was that he was too close to the EFF, and that there were instances of corruption. Many allegations have been leveled. So all these parties are going to have to build in on some or other ways, Sakina, ways of keeping each other in check, ways of keeping each other accountable, because at the end of the day, it is about the voters. It's about service delivery. It's about the citizens of Johannesburg in this instance. And they should always remember that they're in service of us. We who live in Johannesburg, we want to live in a clean, functional, well-governed, financially viable city. And that's at the end of the day what they need to achieve. If they don't, us as voters, the larger public, need to kick all of them out.
And just finally, as we wrap this, Pieter, your article early last week about the ANC, and just to quote you, saying they're losing its swagger, pummeled everywhere. And that aptly predicted what some of the outcomes have been that we've already seen over the past few days in the metros. But did you anticipate that things will turn out the way they did, especially over the past 2 days or so? And also, in your view, if the ANC wants to arrest the slide, you say it needs to play a constructive and effective role as opposition that will keep the executive in check without hampering service delivery. How do you foresee all of this playing out in the near future?
Well, Sakina, first up, you referred to the last 2 days. This process has been in the works for the last 5 years. If you cast your mind back to the 2016 municipal elections, it was at the height of state capture. Jacob Zuma was still head of state. The Constitutional Court had just delivered its verdict around the Public Protector's Nkandla report. The Public Protector was busy finalizing her state of capture report. And back then, the ANC had already lost Nelson Mandela Bay, Kabaga. It also lost control of Johannesburg for a brief period. It also lost control of Pretoria to Tshwane, to our minority government. So the writing was on the wall in 2016 already. Then in 2019, the ANC lost large amounts of support at the general election, going under 60% for the first time, dropping to as much as low as 57%. So the writing has been on the wall for a good couple of years, but the ANC have not managed to turn around. They've not made the fundamental changes that a political party needs to make if it wants to stop these electoral losses. This process has now simply gathered pace. In the 2021 municipal election, its general support has dropped below 50 for the first time. That's an enormously important psychological barrier. It's now lost control of all the big municipalities in Gauteng, and it's on the verge of losing Ekurhuleni. So this is a crisis moment for the African National Congress. We're not seeing the urgency from the party in attempts to turn things around. The party is still beset by corruption. It's still backing tainted mayoral candidates like we saw in Ekurhuleni. And I would argue that this process is only going to gather pace from here on in. And I don't see the African National Congress that they have the ability to do introspection and to make the very deep and fundamental changes that they're going to have to make if they want to survive. 2024 is going to be the watershed election in this country's democratic history. And there's every chance that the ANC, who have sat very comfortably since 1994, might lose its majority. And it's all due to corruption, mismanagement, and I would argue a leadership that is grossly out of touch with what's happening at ground level.
And Pieter, and we're going to have to leave it there for now, but no doubt we'll keep our eye on these developments. But thanks so much for your time. News 24 Assistant Editor, Political Commentator Pieter du Toit on municipal politics as parties use their power to bring a shift in the power dynamics. Let's take a quick break before the news.